Out east. Oh my gosh, I got to meet Raphael Warnock and John.
There he is. Okay.
Tracy Abrams.
Okay, this is to call the city council meeting for October 17th, 2022 to order. Eric, roll call, please.
Mateo? Here. Goebel?
Here.
Sawyer?
Here.
Hall?
Here.
Jacoby?
Here.
Parker?
Here.
Okay, would you all please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Eric, do we have public comment?
We do have one written public comment, and then I believe we received one public comment form. I think I passed it down on number 3.
I did think.
Do you need to read that public comment?
One of them was requesting to speak, but I will read this email. So this email was from Velocity Himura. It says, please read aloud, public comment. My name is JD. I've been homeless my entire life. Not by choice, I'm now only 33. I've worked in Newport for 2 years now at various places, waiting on affordable housing to open and be affordable. I've been physically disabled since I was 7, and I cannot find housing here in the town. Here I've chosen to live. I, like all other homeless, are taxpayers of this city. A taxpayer is one who pays taxes in the state at the stores, the food, bag, and gas taxes. We buy all of these, not only those who receive or pay into taxes or has a job or home is a taxpayer. I have watched those in this community degrade, dehumanize, and lie about the homeless residents in our community. You have impounded people's shelters, cars, belongings, as to criminalize people for our government's mistakes. It's not the citizens' job to stop crimes, nor to build our own 7 million houses to catch up on the affordable housing laws in place. I have read in my research, we all have the right to sanitation and water, but this city has none for us, even though we also pay for this. The Supreme Court ruled further 2 days before the last meeting, saying until this, our city has the shelters or provisions to services that are a basic human right. You cannot enforce making sleeping in public a crime, law, and ordinance. It is either abide and die on the street with no shelter, tent, or parking. Cruel and unusual punishment is what it is. I've sent videos on other towns that have it worse and doing a better job. Follow in their steps, I urge you. Use eminent domain and buy things near Grace Winds and fund Grace Winds. What have you been doing this whole time? Build smaller houses we can also rent. This is how we combat this issue. Not more laws against it that will just be struck down as unconstitutional when it's too late. You, who we pay in taxes, must make a safe and secure area for tiny homes before you can make us, the public, leave public lands, including streets and sidewalks. This town has only made fun and harassed its most vulnerable by making us sleep outside without first asking us what we would like. 13% of funds isn't enough. Please do better, not worse for us if you want everyone else to have jobs. That requires very few things, a lockable tiny house for storage and safety, and everyone will be happier, never happy. You're not the Complaints and Feelings Council. The homeless have been complaining for years. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Tracy, did you have a comment?
It's not on.
Light's got to be on, Tracy.
You can turn it over and flip the switch.
Red light.
Is that better?
That's much more.
All right. I'm Tracy Flowers with Grace Winds Haven, as you all probably know that. But I just wanted to throw a couple of things at you as the last 2 weeks have happened with the ordinance, and just want you guys to think about something. So obviously there's a lot of people complaining about the new ordinance, and that's here nor there. But one of the concerns that I'm having is when you guys put into effect the 200 feet from a homeless services, we're talking about some really vulnerable people. The ones that are sleeping out in front of Grace Winds Haven are a 70-year-old woman who just lost her husband and child to a drunk driver. She's paranoid to be on the street. She has been to the hospital because she is so paranoid that she can't breathe without being around people. And we're asking her to leave the only security she has. We have people who are waiting for their disability check, and they can't walk to Grace Winds, nor can they afford to drive to Grace Winds if they have to move from in front of our building. We're talking about a gentleman who falls every single day, and we're the only people who can pick him up off the sidewalk. We have to call ambulances for him at least once a week, and we're going to ask him to go somewhere else. And we have another gentleman who's almost 80 years old who we have to plug in at night so that he has oxygen to breathe in order to live. And we're asking him to leave from in front of our building. I'm sorry I'm emotional, but these people I love, these people I'm seeing that are crucial in front of our building that could potentially die not being in front of Grace Winds. Grace Winds isn't just a day resource center. We are a life-saving operation for some of these people. And you guys just ask them to move further away than they can get any services because they can't make it to our facility if they have to move from our facility. So I just want you guys to reconsider some of that. And I appreciate all you guys have put into it. I appreciate all of what you guys do for Grace Winds. So I'm not trying to be complaining or anything. I think you guys need to know who's really out front of our building. It's not capable people that can get there, by walking a couple of miles or even from down the street. These are literally people who would not get any services whatsoever if they have to go any further away than they are.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hey, can I have an ask for
Go
something?
ahead.
Tracy, is that 200 feet from Highway 20, does that take your building out of service?
No, our building must be right at about the 200-foot mark. The 200-foot mark that's in the ordinance that I'm referring to is where it says that they can't sleep within 200 feet of a homeless service. And so that puts them, virtually they can't sleep by the Avery building because that's a homeless service. Then we have the school because we have Head Start. Then we have the high school, and then we have the food bank. So we have virtually the entire First Street is not available for anybody to sleep on. And which is okay if they weren't these vulnerable people that are, I've got like 10 of them that sleep out front, and they're all vulnerable people. They're higher vulnerability than just your average person.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Yep.
Is there anyone else that wishes to address the council on any item not on the agenda?
Can I ask a follow-up? Tracy, actually, can you hang on for a second? Of course. Just a follow-up to what you were just saying. Did you bring that to us before we decided? Because I don't recall you testifying, and I just feel like that's really helpful for us to know. And a few of us from the city went to the League of Oregon Cities homelessness workshop all day today, and we recognize that we cannot penalize where people sleep or lie or rest. And so I get that piece of it. So I'm just trying to get a little bit of a sense of how we can continue to nuance that and review that. So
Sure. So I didn't testify to anything beforehand because up until the last meeting, I had not heard the part of the homeless service until the last meeting. And I was kind of dumbfounded, I need to reread this and see what that really says before I say anything. And then and then I've had all these people flooding to me. We're not moving because we can't go anywhere. We are not going to get help. And so then I was like, okay, we need to say something. So here I am.
Are these people sleeping on your property or on the sidewalk?
It is on the sidewalk or in their vehicles on the street.
Okay.
I've been on council 12 years. I've never seen an ordinance etched in stone,
Oh, sure.
so they can always be changed.
Right. Well, and that's what I thought. And I know you guys have been very flexible with working with all of my crazy and chaos. So I just wanted to bring it to your guys' attention.
Great, thank you very much.
Good, Tracy.
Okay, we'll move on to the next item, Eric.
The next item is proclamations and presentations and special recognitions. We have 5 oaths of offices tonight for firefighters, and we'll be conducting those individually.
Chief?
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. This is pretty exciting for Newport Fire Department. We are giving the oath of office for 5 new firefighters, and that is a first, really, as far as I understand, in the history of the department, as far as staff goes, to swear in this
We want
many
you to have
firefighters.
music in the background for what you're saying. Sorry,
Like
there was,
that?
someone's cell phone was going off, but it was music. We want to underscore what you're saying.
So anyways, this is a exciting moment for us. For council, the authorization that you gave us to hire 3 additional staff, this is almost the entire fulfillment of that. We have 1 person left in backgrounds, but this is 5 out of the 6. And so we are getting close to being fully staffed, which is really exciting. These folks bring a lot of new energy for us. For the existing staff for Newport Fire Department, we are seeing almost a doubling of new folks within a few months' time. And that's really, I'm excited, and I know the rest of the staff are excited, and we're excited to see what you all are capable of, what you bring to the city and to the department to serve our community. So with that, let's get started. And we'll be doing this 1 firefighter at a time for the audience.
All right, I'm just going to call up the first person here, and please come up and we'll administer the oath of office. The first person is going to be Brian Heisler. Brian, raise your right hand and repeat after me, please. I state your name.
I, Brian Heisler,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will uphold the Constitution of the United States
that I will uphold
and the state of Oregon
and the state of Oregon
and the ordinances of the city of Newport and faithfully perform the duties of firefighter upon which I am about to enter.
and
Congratulations.
His dad will be the one putting the back.
The second person is going to be Luke Richcreek. All right, Luke, raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Luke Richard,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will uphold the Constitution of the United States,
that I will uphold the Constitution of the United States,
the state of Oregon,
the state of Oregon,
and the ordinances of the city of Newport,
and the ordinances of the city of Newport,
and faithfully perform the duties of firefighter
and faithfully perform the duties of firefighter
upon which I am about to enter.
upon which I am about to enter.
Congratulations.
Oh, yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
The third one is going to be Stephen Moody. All right, Stephen, raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Steve Moody,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will uphold the Constitution of the United States
to uphold the Constitution of the United States
and the state of Oregon
and the state of Oregon
and the ordinances of the city of Newport,
and the ordinances of the city of
and faithfully perform the duties of firefighter upon which I am about to enter. Congratulations.
All right.
Can I have William Pricer come up, please? If I can have you raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, William Prizer,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will uphold the Constitution of the United States
that I will uphold the Constitution of the United States
and the state of Oregon
and the state of Oregon
and the ordinances of the city of Newport,
and the ordinances of the city of Newport,
and faithfully perform the duties of firefighter
and faithfully perform the duties of firefighter
upon which I am about to enter.
upon which I'm about to enter.
Congratulations. All right, can I have Christopher Gilbert come up, please? Can I have you raise your right hand and repeat after me? I state your name.
I, Christopher Gilbert,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will uphold the Constitution of the United States
that I will uphold the Constitution of the United States
and the state of Oregon
and the state of Oregon
and the ordinances of the city of Newport,
and the ordinance of the city of Newport,
and faithfully perform the duties of firefighter
faithfully perform the duties of firefighter
upon which I am about to enter.
upon which I'm about to enter.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Dean, you're going to wreck the picture.
We have one, this one? Yeah, so we're ready. Five firefighters and then Chief Scares, one of those? Thanks, Council.
Nope.
Welcome to you all. We're excited to have all you new faces working for the city, and I think you're going to have a great career here. And again, welcome all.
Hey, Chief, why don't you tell us how this all happened, they qualified and all that stuff, how they became a firefighter? I think it'd be interesting for the council.
Absolutely. I'd be happy to. Thank you for asking. So as you know, this process is about a 6-month process from start to finish. So folks, after we post the positions, folks apply. We review applications to see if they meet the minimum requirements. After they meet the minimum requirements, then we do a phone screen to do an initial screening and basically whittle the numbers down to a little more manageable level. Then they go through a customer service survey that's done online, and then we take the top scores of that and then bring them in for in-person interview. They have to do a panel interview, they have to do an EMS scenario, and they have to do a chief's interview. Then they also have to have what's called a valid CPAT, which is a candidate physical abilities test They have to have that. It shows that they physically can do the job of firefighter. And then they also have to have a passing score on a written exam that is taken through a third-party vendor that does that for the city. Then, after all that, then we give them a conditional job offer. Then they have an extensive background and reference check process. Then they have to pass a psychological screening, and then finally a medical physical. And then after that, we give them a final offer. So it's a very extensive, thorough process. And I want to give a shout out to HR, Barb James and Jody, who really helped move this process along. But we have found that if we do our due diligence on the front end and make sure we get good quality people, people that are good human beings, that care about people, that want to serve the community, it works out all the better for us. So, and I think that's what we have with these 5. So I'm really proud of them, and I'm looking forward to what they can do. I hope I answered your question.
Well, yeah, that's great, and I think it's congratulations, guys. So what's the process moving forward? Are they going to be on call, or are they going to?
So they've already been assigned to shifts, and we actually are putting the final steps of a academy together. It'll be a 2-week academy. Again, another first for Newport Fire Department. We've never done a staff academy before. And so they have a extensive training process that is overseen by our assistant chief, Tom Sakaris, and our captains. That has, it's broken up into thirds of the year, and they have to meet requirements for taking quizzes, for doing practical application. There's city policies, procedures, equipment that they have to learn, and it's all spelled out in the packets, and then they get evaluated every third of the year, and then at the end of their probationary year, which is 1 year for firefighters, then they'll have a final evaluation before they move on to regular employment.
So they are on probation for a year?
They're on probation for a year, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you for asking.
Thank you, Chief. Welcome all. Yes. Okay, Eric, next item, please.
The next item that we have on the agenda is the consent calendar, which consists of the approval of the minutes of the regular session of October 3rd, 2022, the approval of the minutes of the work session of October 3rd, 2022, the approval of the minutes of the executive session of October 3rd, 2022, favorably recommend to the Oregon Liquor Control Commission, OLCC, the approval of an OLCC full on-premise license for Kaizen Sushi Corporation, DBA Asiatico Waterfront Sushi, located at 875 Southwest Bay Boulevard. Receipt of approved committee minutes consisting of the Planning Commission regular session of 8/22/22, Planning Commission work session of 8/22/22, Planning Commission work session of 9/12/2022, Planning Commission work session of 9/26/2022, and the Library Advisory Committee meeting minutes of July 13th, 2022, and ratification of the mayor's appointment of Terry Murphy and Vicky Bach to fill vacant seats on the 60-plus advisory committee for 2-year terms, which expire January 2024.
Okay, do we have any questions or comments or a motion?
Move to approve. Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, motion made by Councilor Goebel, seconded by Councilor Jacoby. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing and hearing none. Thank you. Eric, next item, please.
The next item is going to be public hearing and potential adoption of ordinance number 2203, an ordinance amending Newport Municipal Code 9.50.030, notice of campsite cleanup.
Spencer?
On October 3rd, the City Council adopted ordinance number 2198, an ordinance repealing and replacing Chapter 9.50 and amending Section 6.25 of the Newport Municipal Code relating to camping. Ordinance number 2203 is a technical amendment to clarify the current practice for 72-hour written notice under the camping ordinance adopted on October 3rd. The amendment clarifies that the telephone number for retrieving items picked up from the campsites will be included in the 72-hour written notice posted and distributed under subsection B of section 9.50.030 of the Newport Municipal Code. So from a operations standpoint, it doesn't change what we've been doing. It makes the language of our code match the process that we're using there. And as the mayor said earlier to Tracy, these ordinances are not etched in stone, and we're going to be kind of in a constant review process of these provisions as we go forward. But at this point, I would recommend the mayor conduct a public hearing on ordinance number 2203, an ordinance amending section 9.50.030 of the Newport Municipal Code.
At this time, I'd like to open the public hearing for ordinance number 2203, an ordinance amending section 9.50.030 of the Newport Municipal Code related to notice of campsite cleanup. Does anyone wish to address the council? Okay, at this time, I'll close the public hearing. And do we have questions or comments or a motion?
So Spencer, can we take that issue that was brought up earlier to a work session and try to resolve the issue of camping around Grace Winds?
I think on that particular issue, we're certainly happy to meet with Grace Winds on that issue. The issue of the setbacks were something the council wanted incorporated in the final ordinance, which we did, but we're happy to meet with Tracy.
I don't think it was our intent to put Grace Winds out of business, so.
Yeah, well, I don't think it'll put Grace Winds out of business. I mean, it'd be great to be able to put Grace Winds out of business because we don't have a problem to deal with. But Grace Winds has a lot of job security in that front. But I think it's something that we'll certainly be happy to sit down with you and discuss that issue.
Thanks for bringing that up, by the way.
Yeah, it was an unintended consequence, I think.
That's what I figured. I just thought it needed to be brought forward.
Okay, any further comments or a motion?
I'll move. I move to place for final passage and read by title only ordinance number 2203 and ordinance amending section 9.50.030 of the Newport Municipal Code relating to notice of campsite cleanup.
A second.
Okay, motion made by Councilor Goebel, seconded by Councilor Jacoby. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Aye for Ryan.
I think, just to clarify, there's the delay. Counselor Parker, are you in favor or opposed to this motion?
In favor of the motion.
Thank you.
Okay, motion carries. Next item, Eric.
Oh, we got to read by title.
Oh, that's right. Roll call.
So Pateo,
Aye.
Goebel,
Aye.
Sawyer,
Aye.
Hall,
Aye.
Jacoby,
Aye.
Parker.
Eric, before we conclude,
Aye.
you need to read it by title before the vote is taken. Okay. You didn't do that. That's one of the requirements under the charter. So you need to read the ordinance by title only, and then we'll do the roll call vote again.
Okay, so this will be ordinance number 2203, an ordinance amending section 9.50.030 of the Newport Municipal Code related to notice of campsite cleanup. Pateo,
Aye.
Goebel,
Aye.
Sawyer,
Aye.
Hall,
Aye.
Jacoby,
Aye.
Parker.
Aye.
Okay, Beatrice, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I have a comment regarding about the 72 hours cleanup. I know that, we received an email that it hasn't been very clear, the time and where to put it and where to post it, and the map, it doesn't show really, it's kind of hard to see it. So I'm wondering, is any other ways to, not everybody has phones, so maybe, posting maybe in places, where people, like at the library, in different places where people gathers, like stores. I wonder, we can do more than just,
Yeah, no, I think we can, and it's a challenging thing to graphically show And so the only thing that we could do to make it more visible is to break it into pieces where you can enlarge it a little more on a phone device. I think it shows up okay on a computer. The 72-hour notice isn't the issue. That's all posted at each site when we're doing a cleanup. So that's all conventional paper signs on all the entryways in and out of the places, and that hasn't been a problem. I think the issue that Councilor Kaplan was referring to was trying to, show the map in a better way. I'm not sure.
Yeah, and I just sent an email account responding to that, and I'm going to be clear. The interactive map and the PDFs were put together probably more for those individuals who are helping homeless persons find a place to camp than homeless individuals themselves. We understand that many homeless individuals wouldn't have phones and the ability to look at an interactive web map, but it could be of significant use to Tracy and Company, or Blair over at Legal Aid, or people with the faith-based community that are helping those individuals who need a place to camp and are uncertain as to where it's permissible. Particularly the web-based app, which allows you to zoom in to the parcel level. And then there's also the fact that our police department, our community service officers and police officers will have this available to them as well. So when they're working with folks who are camping in a prohibited area, they'll have that available to them in the field to help guide those individuals to a place where camping is permissible.
So again, a lot of this is going to be an act of refinement as we go through the processes to try to do it. And the map, again, some people do not read maps. I know when I travel with my wife, she does not read maps anymore. And it's true. But, so maps are good for some people. They don't mean anything to other people that look at them. So we'll take a look at how we can kind of broaden the information that we're putting out on this issue. And see if we can cover the bases. But clearly, a few of the key locations that you referred to are important spots to have the information.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very challenging, to have, like a design street, That's the reason I both know previously, because I feel it's very hard to design streets and let people know where they have to be. I think it's very challenging, that part, but I feel also, I think we need to have in this engagement, Grace Wins and people who can guide us better, how we can support, with information. I think it's not only us. I think I just want to make sure that, everybody's engaged in this part. And I think, we need to ask more Grace Wins and the group and say, how would you like to see this information and how we work together? Because that's the thing, working together, not, just us deciding.
Yeah. Well, I think we have a pretty good history of working together on these issues to resolve matters. In fact, those that attended the League's homeless thing, we got a very nice compliment from Blair Bobbier, who used Newport as an example of how to do this in a collective way and listening to people and making modifications to our original ordinances. And so I think, this is going to be as the mayor indicated, this is going to be an ongoing process. And I just read the book about failing forward. We're going to make some mistakes along the way. If we learn from those mistakes and we do a better job, on the next round, that's the type of progress that needs to be made. These areas that are just incredibly complicated and complex and very challenging for the homeless community, for our property owners, for everybody in the mix. So we will take any ideas that folks have to try to improve on the way we communicate these things.
Yeah, so I think I work with Derek on the maps. The biggest issue, I think, is the buffer zones, because if you look at the prohibited areas, we've got certain parks off limits. I mean, everyone knows where the parks are. I mean, we have to make sure people are aware those parks are off limits, but those are pretty well designated. They're defined areas, so there's no issue about whether you're in the park or not. We have visual line of sight from a constructor or posted trail, so that, again, if you're on Forest Park Trail or Ocean to Bay Trail, If you're offline of sight as you're walking down the trail, that's not a prohibited area. So that's pretty well, delineated. Again, people need to understand that's an open or prohibited area. The other one is, I'm just look through the list, city-owned facilities. Those are well marked, well designated, so there's not an issue there. Public rights-of-way within 200 feet of certain facilities, that's where you get into the gray area that we need more kind of maybe information out there as to what those boundaries are. And 100 feet off 101 and 20, that's the other buffer zone. And I think what we were struggling with on these maps is those buffer zones. Everything else is pretty well marked and delineated. You just have to get that information out. Again, the buffer zones is going to be more challenging because, again, those aren't clearly defined. And even if you put a map together, it still might be difficult to figure out where you are on that particular side or, within the 200 feet or outside the 200 feet. So.
Earlier today at that homelessness workshop, it was brought up the piece about how you have to post signs at every entry point of a campsite if you're going to do a camp cleanup. Do you recall that, Spencer?
Yes.
And Derek, you might recall that as well. Or Dean, you might as well. So this says, I'm so glad that Councilor Mateo kind of addresses, because I forgot I was going to bring this back up. The piece about, it says at least 72 hours before in the ordinance, but what was advised was to do that daily, to do that often, because signs might get torn down. Or so I don't know if we need to then further specify that in here, that it would be a frequent reposting or something, if there is going to be a cleanup.
Yeah, and I think as a matter of practice, I think Jovita does check these sites. If the signs are down, I think she does replace them. So I don't think that changes anything from what I heard today, anything that we're currently doing. So, but the question that Councilor Hall was bringing up was what happens if we put the signs up in all these entryways and they get torn down. The recommendation is to really check them twice a day and replace them if they get torn down and document that the signs were up. So,
David?
So the reason why we put that language in there regarding the 72-hour notice, because that's what's required under state law. That's the statute 3124 that says in the 72-hour notice, you have to put that information in there. We can do more than that, and our practice is, but I want to make sure that our ordinance match what the current state requirement is under the statute. So that's the reason why we made the change tonight. We can go beyond that, but at least we have the bare minimum in our ordinance to match the state law.
Can I ask another question? I just want to ask about the follow-up. If someone is 72 hours and they don't move, what is the process after that?
that's when we collect. That's when we collect the materials and we store them for 30 days. There's a notice again that tells them how to contact the police department to arrange to pick up the materials that are stored. And so we, after 30 days of storage, if nobody picks them up, then we can dispose of the materials. So, and the one thing that was kind of reassuring today, after going through all the extensive discussions with our camping ordinances, is I think we got it legally right. The key is, how is this going to work from an operational standpoint? And that's until we get into this on a more regular basis, we won't have an answer to that question. But as indicated, this isn't the last amendment that we're probably going to make to this ordinance. I think over time it'll be something that gets tweaked a few other ways. So.
And last question. When the police contact the person, do they support finding like where to connect in the community? Like, if someone, needs to move from certain place, like finding a place where they can go, or giving the information where exactly they can go. I mean, is that clear, that information to support, with something like that?
As far as where they can go to pick up their materials?
I mean, when they ask to move from that place.
We don't tell them specifically where they should go. We learned more about that today too, because when you tell them where they should go, then we're accepting liability for that being a safe place for them to go. And so, so we will, provide information about where they can't go. It's up to them to determine where they would go to. And, and so that's the, and in fact, that was a specific question I asked today, because we'd like to be more helpful about that. And the answer is, once you tell someone to go to this place, if something happens to them at this place, and there's no controls or regulations on that place, then as a city organization, we are potentially liable if something happened to them at that place. So it's this whole thing, I think that's why I'm having trouble remembering names tonight. It's kind of mind-boggling to try to figure out how to navigate all these various issues and be fair and reasonable going forward. I think the other biggest thing that I think is the potential to kind of lead us down a more constructive path on dealing with homelessness in Lincoln County is the House Bill 4123 process that's underway. Lincoln County has $1 million to develop a comprehensive regional plan, and then potentially use some of those funds for actually implementing the things that are in that plan going forward. And I think, and again, it was interesting because the group that we met with today consisted of heavy concentration of folks on the coast, Seaside and North Bend and Lakeview, and is Lakeview in Coos County? Okay. Lakeside, yeah. Because Lakeview is in interior, right? Yeah, okay. I thought, boy, why'd they come all the way here to Newport for that? But we also had people from Portland suburbs that were participating in the meeting, and I think the biggest takeaway is for all our coastal communities, we're really struggling with the same issues, and nobody is particularly proud of the efforts that they've been able to do as a individual unit of government. And the general consensus is that this is going to take us working together and joining resources in order to have enough sufficient resources to make a difference in some aspects of homelessness. And I think the House Bill 4123, and one of the reasons I've invested a lot of time on behalf of the city of Newport in that process is, to me, that's going to be the best pathway to really make some meaningful difference that I've seen in the time I've been here in Newport. So I think we've got to make that work and be able to address many of the the human issues with homelessness in the county. So.
Okay.
Yeah, Councilor Jacoby, did you know you were gone for the last meeting?
Right.
Yeah, but that group is meeting monthly, and it consists of all 7 cities. Let's Drive.
No, I was on Zoom for that meeting,
okay.
but I couldn't go to the meeting that was held today.
Yep.
I did have a question. You said about the city's liability. If a person in need of a place to shelter was sent to a street and something befell them, the city has insurance, and it's,
Yeah, we have insurance. And David can probably speak a little bit on the issue of, I can't think of the terms right now. Yep, state-created danger. That's what we're doing.
State-created danger, if anybody heard that.
Yeah, and that's in a sense, if we tell someone to go here, then that's where we're imposing that potential liability on ourselves, and you can talk.
Well, I won't go into much detail other than I sent everyone a while back a guidance document that was put up by the League of Oregon Cities. It was just a few months ago, and that actually was put together by a task force or a group of attorneys and other folks that laid out the different issues that we as cities have to be aware of, and that's really a great document. I think we went through it a couple of meetings ago. But one of the new principles that came out of this whole review and research, and a lot of it's coming out of a U.S. Supreme Court decision, but a lot of the new kind of nuances are coming out of the state of California. Surprise, I guess. But that's kind of what we have to be aware of, because that could be kind of creeping up into Oregon at some point through our court decisions. And it just really, again, it's a lot of nuances, but the bottom line is, if we start telling people where they can go, or, this is a place where they can, put up a tent or whatever, and it's a place that we might be aware of has some risk of harm, or we create a situation in which there is a likelihood or a potential, there's liability. And there's always liability in anything a city does, but, when you start taking certain steps and you start acting kind of indifferently to what's going on, that creates a higher liability. And our insurer, CIS, doesn't like that. They like to make sure we're doing it the right way. We're reducing our liability rather than increasing it, because if there is a lot of liability and there's a risk of, some potential, compensation or some other type of relief that we have to provide, they typically are the ones that have to put in the resources to defend us. And they want to make sure that they don't have to do that as much as possible. So we have an insurer, and they help guide us and advise us on what we should or shouldn't do for their very reason of they want to reduce their liability, which reduces our liability.
Yeah, they talked today about a case in LA that's going before the courts where California allowed them to camp under overpasses. And what happens if somebody gets hit by a car is the city having liability for allowing them to be under the overpasses. And that hasn't been litigated fully, so we won't know until it's done. But you're right, there is a tremendous amount of liability whenever we say you can go here, or whatever.
So, I think our approach was, it's difficult for folks like Tracy and Blair over at Legal Aid to kind of read through this, but, we kind of set out a framework of areas where you are not allowed, but everything else is open. The difficulty is, first, defining what those areas are that are prohibited, clearly, like with the buffer zones, which I think we need more work to do, but really, people then have to determine or find out through various means where they can go. And hopefully the different facilities that service the homeless will be more capable in doing that as time moves on. But when we proactively start doing it as a city, that creates the liability that we have to be concerned about. If the other organizations that are servicing the homeless are kind of implementing what we put in place, that's no longer really our liability, but it does help us because the organizations are implementing the ordinance on our behalf to make sure areas that are available are places where the homeless and other folks know to go to spend the night or whatever else that they need to do.
And there was a situation they brought up as an example today that was rather unfortunate, but in downtown Salem, if you're familiar with the Marion Street Park next to the Marion Street Bridge, that's kind of been the homeless encampment, and they'd actually moved closer to being closer to commercial instead of more in the park. And in like March of this year, a drunk driver at like 2 a.m. went off road and killed, I think, 4 people. I looked at the article briefly after they mentioned it, but I haven't had a chance to go into it. But just that state created danger, like that potentiality of risk, and how do we minimize that?
And I think that's one of the reasons, and Derek did a really good job on not just the maps, but, Derek put a lot of this planning stuff together as far as what's prohibited. And that's why we have certain areas, certain streets marked off as prohibited because of the high traffic volume and the danger that could be created by people camping right on the curb or in the right of way. And that's why we have the buffer zone, at least off 101 and 20, is to kind of get folks off those, those streets and those roads that have are more highly trafficked, which creates not just a liability for us, but also creates danger for them. So there's a lot of thought that went into this, and maybe we need to kind of adjust it based on what I'm hearing from Tracy and others. But I think the framework is a good framework, and we just have to maybe work around the edges to make it better.
The one thing that City Attorney David Allen would love to hear is that Patty highly emphasized lots of whereases in the ordinances to really state the reasons why we're doing something. Those have played a big case in some of the court decisions in understanding the rationale that the governing body used in approving that. So while I haven't paid that much attention to the whereases, I will from now on, David. So
I guess I will too, because I like to keep them brief and to the point, but apparently that might not be something we need to kind of take on certain ordinances. I wouldn't say
right.
Every ordinance.
No.
On certain ones, perhaps. But I'm looking at the whereas clauses, and we might be able to expand on it, but I think the framework of what it is we're doing in the rationale is encompassed in these whereas clauses, but we could always expand on it in the future.
Derek,
Oh, I was just going to say, that was music to my ears today. I mean, that whereas clauses are very important, in my opinion. That's why you often see ordinances I draft with lots of them.
I might be confusing Derek with David on the whereas clause.
No, it tells a story. All of these issues are discussed. You guys all talk about it in these public hearings, but to distill it into the ordinance and explain this is what the reasoning is for this is very important. And it does play out in the courts and litigation where they're saying, well, what was the local government's, what were they thinking at the time? Oh, here it all is.
I just had my last question, sorry.
You already did.
So how soon, that change can happen with Grace Winds?
Well, we'll meet with Grace Winds within the next few days and discuss what the situation is and determine whether there's a quick solution, but we certainly can bring a report back to the next council meeting on that, so.
I think one of the key things that they said today at the workshop, and of course I think we all know this anyway, is this is all subject to change at any time because of court decisions and the Ninth Circuit and the state of Oregon actually changing the law too. The legislature could. So it's fluid. It's not, like I said, etched in stone. So.
And 10 days ago, the new grant pass decision changed some additional elements. That's just in the last 10 days. So fortunately, I think we addressed them appropriately in our code the way we treated it. So, but anyway, it's going to change continually.
Okay, with that, Eric, next item, please.
The next item is public hearing and potential approval of a lease agreement with purchase option between the City of Newport and Pacific Seafood Newport LLC for city-owned docks in upland areas adjacent to the public parking lot on Bay Boulevard across from Fall Street.
That's her.
The City of Newport owns a small section of dock and adjacent upland area which has been leased for seafood processing continuously since 1957. The current lease is with Pacific Seafood Newport LLC. It was entered into in 2016. Pacific Seafood owns the land and docks on the waterfront on both sides of this property, so it's kind of an orphan piece of property that's in between their two properties. Since the lease contains a purchase option, the public hearing is required prior to city action on entering into a new lease. The proposed lease is for a 3-year period with an option for the company to extend the lease for an additional 2 years. An inflationary adjustment has been applied to the lease rate, raising it from $3,000 per month to $3,500 per month. If the lease is extended, then an inflationary adjustment would be applied to the rental fee at that time. Pacific Seafood is continuing to work on long-term redevelopment plans for its properties, including the properties surrounding and potentially including the city property in this location. The terms of the purchase option is if Pacific Seafood's going to invest at least $1 million into the properties, including the lease land, then Pacific Seafood would have an exclusive right to purchase the property being leased, provided the company makes that investment on the site, and should Pacific Seafood wish to exercise that, still an option of the council as to whether you would sell the property or not to Pacific Seafood based on the project. So it's not an obligation to sell, but it does allow the city council to sell this land to this leaseholder during the term of this lease, should that be something that the city council deems is in the city's best interest. And so the recommendation would be for the mayor to conduct a public hearing on this particular issue.
At this time, I'd like to open the public hearing regarding the issuance of a new lease to Pacific Seafood Newport LLC, which includes an exclusive right to purchase the property for the city-owned dock and the upland areas adjacent to the public parking lot located at Bay Boulevard across from Fall Street. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak on this issue?
No one there, Dean.
I don't see anybody saying they want to, so I'll close the public hearing. Questions, comments from the council?
Yeah, I have a question. So the city also owns a parking lot there, right?
Correct.
And the little map that you included in the report, it looks like the piece is in the water. Is that what we're
Right.
releasing?
Yeah, but the dock itself is, there's some leased lands that the city leases that are part of this property, and Pacific Seafood also pays those lease amounts on behalf of the city for the in-water portion of the property.
So what we're talking about is the in-water piece right now?
No, there's some land, there's some upland land on that as well, and Derek, you want to elaborate a little further on that?
Yeah, it's basically, the upland area would be basically they have a little bit of a storage area. When you look at that parking lot, you have kind of a fenced area on the bay side of that lot. From that fence to the bay is what this lease covers. The parking lot proper is not part of the lease.
Okay. That's that yellow area you have on your map here?
Yeah, yellow-orange area is the lease area.
Yeah, did you find that? It's attached to the lease.
And the parking lot is still going to be public parking, right? Even though it looks like it's private seafood parking, right?
In front there.
Correct, it's a
Right up
public
Bay
parking
Boulevard.
lot.
This is
It would stay public.
Yeah, that's still public.
Yeah, and it does actually get quite a bit of public parking use
Very last page,
through the course of the day, and the parking plan has
the third one.
addresses how that would be used in the future. But periodically, Pacific Seafood will ask to use a portion of that lot for storage, temporary storage, and those sorts of things, and we review that depending on the time of year.
Derek, are you going to put parking meters on that front side? Don't answer that. Okay, any other questions or comments from the council? Ryan, you good over there?
Stupendous. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
We want to keep you that way, sir.
Okay, so we just need a motion, right?
We need a
Correct.
motion.
I'll go ahead and move. I move to authorize the city manager to execute a lease agreement with purchase option between the City of Newport and Pacific Seafood Newport LLC for docks and upland areas adjacent to the public parking lot on Bay Boulevard across from Falls Street, owned by the city, and after determine that the property is surplus for city uses and the sale provision in the lease is in the public interest.
Second.
Second.
Okay, motion made by Counselor Hall, seconded by Counselor Goebel. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you all. Eric, next item, please.
Next item is communications, final report of the short-term rental ordinance implementation work group.
Spencer.
The city council established a short-term rental ordinance implementation work group to collect and evaluate information relating to the implementation of a short-term rental regulations that were approved by the council in 2019 through ordinance number 2144. This work group was created by the council to review the new code requirements addressing various aspects of short-term rentals within the city of Newport. The ordinance made a number of very significant changes in the way short-term rentals are regulated in the city, including creating an overlay zone that provides where new short-term rentals may exist, creating a cap and spacing requirements in accordance with the zoning ordinance to eliminate any concentration of homes for vacation rentals in the overlay zone, grandfathered in existing uses outside the overlay zone until sold, required each vacation rental to be appropriately signed, provided for a system of compliance, and outlined the consequences of violating certain aspects of the ordinances. So those are some of the key components of the ordinance that was implemented. The work group itself, the time was extended in part because of COVID and the impact that COVID had on the whole vacation rental business, and we wanted to have some more, whatever normal times are, of operations to make sure it was actually working pretty well. The work group held their final meeting and are recommending a number of things to the council. The first would be to initiate amendments to the City of Newport short-term rental regulations as recorded by as recommended by the short-term rental ordinance implementation. It's been a long day. Implementation work group and detailed in draft ordinance number 2202. Refer the matter back to the Planning Commission. And the second item would be there were a number of specific recommendations, including automating the annual renewal process for business license endorsements, payment of transient room taxes. And we talked a little bit about that at the work session. We move forward with the state. The second part of that would be taken care of. Implementing an auditing program, which again would be part of the state agreement. If we do that, filling the budget code enforcement position for weekend coverage, and that's a position that we're currently advertising for, and not sure exactly what the status of filling that position is, but that's in the mix. And coordinating with the municipal court to identify steps to address adjudicated citations in a timely manner. So those were the other recommendations. Both councilors Goebel and Jacoby were part of the work group from the beginning. I was part of it as well, and I don't know if either of them would like to provide any further comment on kind of where you believe we're at with this process.
I have a question for clarification on the motion. Is this two motions or one long motion?
I did it as two motions because one is directing the Planning Commission, the other one is directing city administration.
Thank you. Any questions or comments?
Well, I feel fairly pleased with the way the implementation work group turned out, the suggestions that we came up with. It seems like it's going forth smoothly, and the neighborhood and community complaints are about at nil right now. It's kind of odd that most of the calls which went to the 24/7 hotline were from people who could not get into their rental. They couldn't find the keys or couldn't unlock the door. So that was a surprise. But that seemed to be the biggest problem lately. And I think the neighbor and the neighborhoods have become accustomed to each other, and I think we're in a pretty good place. But I am glad that we did put a cap on the number. So.
Else?
Yeah, I was on that, and Cynthia didn't sign the letter, I just noticed here. But you can sign it again now if you want. Yeah, we came up with some recommendations. I feel pretty good about the whole process that was going forward. I do think another code enforcement officer would be great. I think the biggest issues that we've had, I think, is that we've talked about were complaint-driven items that were mostly parking or noise and things like that. I think it had to do with enforcement more than anything. So I'm hoping that we have one position right now, right? We need two.
Yeah, we have one position that was created to help enforce this issue, and then we have the part-time position that would provide weekend coverage as well. And the number of complaints are so few that those folks are fortunately doing a lot of other things for code enforcement as well, and dealing a lot extensively with our homeless camps and those sorts of things. So, but I think the 7-day coverage will be important, and we have plenty to do in all aspects of code enforcement. So I think they'll be busy even if they aren't necessarily specifically focusing entirely on vacation rental stuff on the weekends. So.
I think overall, the public seems pretty happy with what we've come up with. I think we've done it better than most jurisdictions in trying to address the short-term rentals and what's in the zone, what's out the zone. I think it was a more pleasant experience than most cities and counties have encountered.
Yeah, they have gone pretty ugly in a number of places, including here in our own county. But I also want to thank Derek for the work that he's put into this process. He's been married to this issue for a number of years now, and he's not getting a divorce anytime soon, so he'll make sure everything's moving forward good with it. So,
good job, Derek.
Beatrice?
I just want to ask, how many people do we have in the waiting list? Or we have waiting lists or,
Yeah, Derek can.
Yeah, we were up around the low 80s the last time I checked, but we have almost 30 available slots and we're working through that. We just wrapped up the renewal process, and now we're going to be reaching out to those on the wait list, so it'll knock that down quite a bit.
How's it going with the units outside the zone?
Well, I think we originally, when we adopted this current ordinance in 2019, we were at about 46, I want to say, maybe 48. We're at 36, I believe now.
How many?
36.
36, so we're down to 10.
So yeah, so slow attrition.
What do you attribute that, the number of available slots to? Any guesses? Because it seems like more than I expected you would say.
You know, it's interesting. We go through that once a year after we do renewals. And so what we found is we have some number that were actually available previously that people said they were going to act on and never fully act on. And then we have people who, you know, choose to no longer do it for a number of reasons. Sometimes it's they're selling the house. Sometimes it's the circumstance that I think you heard some testimony about, which is they purchased it with the intent to retire out here, and so now they can retire out here, so they no longer want to use it for short-term rental purposes, or you know, it does run the gamut. But for now that we've done this cycle, I think this is the third time through. We're pretty consistently in the like mid-20s in terms of available licenses.
And the one thing to remember too is just because you're on the number one on the waiting list, you have to also satisfy the requirement that of the spacing within a block of other vacation rentals. So you could be number one on the waiting list, but if there's another vacation rental on the same side of the street in that block, then you get pushed to the back or you don't get pushed back to the back of the waiting list, but
Yeah, and not everybody who's on the wait list when their name comes up is ready. We've ran into that too, or they say, look, I've got a long-term tenant, I'm happy right now. So.
Go ahead.
I'm prepared to move. Just thanks to Counselor Jacoby and Counselor
I'll go ahead
Bobo.
and move.
Oh, good,
Okay,
just for their
okay.
work.
I move to initiate amendments to the City of Newport short-term rental regulations as recommended by the Short-Term Rental Ordinance Implementation Work Group and as detailed in draft ordinance number 2202, and refer the matter to the Planning Commission to hold one or more public hearings and provide a recommendation to the City Council on adoption of code changes. I further recommend council
I think we're gonna do them one
concur.
at a time. It's two motions.
Second motion.
I second your first paragraph of the motion.
Okay, so go on.
Did you second?
No,
seconded.
Or vote.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll vote on the first one and
Okay.
then do the
Yeah,
motion.
motion made by Counselor Jacoby, second by Counselor Hall. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, first motion carries. Second motion, please.
I further recommend council concur with the administrative recommendations, including automating the annual renewal process for business license endorsements and payment of transient room taxes, implementing an auditing program, filling the budgeted code enforcement position for weekend coverage, and coordinate with the municipal court to identify steps to address adjudicated citations in a timely manner.
Second.
Motion made by Counselor Jacoby, seconded by Counselor Hall. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you. Eric, next item.
Hey, Dean,
Yes.
can I just say something real quick about this?
Sure.
Generally, I agreed with the way the ordinance was written, but the recommendations included a bit about the city council not being able to adjust the overlay zone cap. And that was a little concern of mine. But I don't see a need to really make any changes currently. So that's why I went ahead and voted for both motions. But I just wanted to get that concern captured. I think when it comes to policy and adjusting that overlay zone, it really should be the council's decision rather than an administrative decision. Perhaps Councilor Jacoby can enlighten us why that was considered as an amendment to change that policy.
Yeah, actually, the amendment takes it out of council's and administration's hands. It fixes it at the number that we're currently at. So it'd be by hard-coded in the code at the number that we're currently at. And so that's...
Okay, that's fine then.
That's the recommendation.
So the only way to change it would be,
Amending the code, ordinance change.
yeah.
Okay.
And right now, it could be done by resolution up to...
200.
Yeah, 200, so...
Okay, Eric, next item, please.
Next item is city manager's report, a report on the status of the traffic study for Northwest Ocean View Drive.
Yes, sir.
That'd be us.
We have gone out after proposals, and we have received proposals that are currently being evaluated, and I'll have city engineer provide an update to the council on where we're at with that process. So Aaron?
So yeah, we put out our RFP as discussed in the last, or the September 6th council meeting. And we sent that out to 3 traffic engineering focused firms, and we got 2 proposals back. That was right when we were in DC. And so as soon as we got back, we started reviewing them. The scores are very, very close, so we asked for some clarification, and I suspect by tomorrow we'll have selected the winning firm, and then start moving forward with finishing up scoping and contracting to get them going. But the somewhat due to illness, our review team was slowed down just a little bit, but we got 2 good proposals, which I think is evidenced by the fact that the scores were so tight. And then, as you may remember, the plan is to sort of phase the work. We've got $150,000 in the budget for the traffic engineering sort of in general. And so phase 1 is focused on Ocean View and a couple other areas where there have been accidents or other need to kind of assess whether we need to make a traffic change. And then phase 2 would be all the other stuff that we'd like to look at. And then if we don't use up the budget, then I'm sure more will come up over the remainder of the year that we can utilize whatever's left over. So if there's any questions, otherwise that's sort of the status update. No action requested or anything.
Mm-hmm.
So the budget is, I'm looking 150 for like a couple studies a year?
Yeah, we weren't sure what they would be coming at us with for price, and the range was, for phase 1 work was from roughly 40 to 70. So seems like we'll have enough for at least the first phase, Ocean View, and the other couple intersections, and then enough to do some other tasks for over the rest of the year, probably.
You said that the priority is in case there are accidents, like if there's in certain streets, certain accidents, that's how it gets prioritized?
Well, that's sort of what brings them to our attention, yeah. So there was one over off Benton, so we want to look at that one. Somebody drove into a fence quite a while ago. We've been kind of monitoring, haven't had anything else happen, but it seems critical enough. But it's a unique enough intersection that the option to maybe turn it into a 4-way stop is a bigger decision than just an obvious solution. So we wanted them to look at that and give us professional advice. And then, yeah, there's I think one other spot that we wanted them to look at in addition to Ocean View. And we were hoping that the budget would be more than enough for that, and it turns out it is. So we should be able to get even more ideas out of them. We've also asked them for some help with our reviewing our street-related details, standard details for design. Figured that'd be a great way to get a firm who does work all over the state, all over the country, to look at our details and make sure that they're pretty much industry standard, stuff that people are used to working with. not a big surprise. So, yeah, so that'll be follow-up work.
Pete, Mark?
So is there enough money in that budget for a golf course drive? I look,
See, I'm thinking, based on the last estimate, maybe about 20 feet of it?
no, that wasn't my question, but that was a joke.
Yeah.
So are you, what are the people going to do for address the public concerns with that street? Are they going to have workshops, or what's going to happen? Is
Yeah,
it
so
just strictly an engineering process, or is it an open public meeting process?
No, it's going to, they both had different approaches sort of on that. I think at the minimum, there was a council education workshop type of thing for both. One did propose public meetings. I think we have the ability to have that as part of the scope either way, because I already sort of suspect what the science is going to tell them. And so I think it's important that regardless of the outcome of the science, that we do have the educational component about, you know, what does the study say? And then why should you do what the study says? But then there's also a component that even if it were to come back, say that one of those streets on Ocean View should not have a stop sign, we want them to give us other solutions too. So it's not just, you know, look at these as a quick study, give us a report saying yes or no, and then walk away. There's an educational component. There's help us find solutions. I specifically said I want you to drive the entirety of Ocean View both ways, in person, give us a toolbox that we can work with. You know, there's some bigger solutions in the transportation system plan already, but those are further out in time due to their cost. So we need that batch of tools that we can work with to help with behavior and making the road safer. And
Are you gonna have public meetings on it?
I think we should. I think we should
Yeah.
at least, at the very least, an open house or a workshop or something. But the minimum was to have a presentation to council about the results of the studies and some education component with that, and then talk about what we can do and can't do, or should and shouldn't do. So, yeah, I think we should.
Good.
Just Cynthia?
Yeah, thank you, Aaron, for moving forward on this. It sounds like we will make some good progress. I do have a question you may have an answer to. It appears there's been a post placed on Ocean View where the digital stop sign might go, or speed sign, excuse me.
Yeah.
Is that going to happen? Do we have to wait for the whole study, or?
No, that's an internal, so I actually got to ride out in Chief Malloy's cool police car, and we kind of figured out a spot that would have line of sight for the radar to do its job, but not cause a problem, because that's pretty close to that start of a blind curve there.
Yeah.
So we picked the spot, that's where that post is. It's just a matter of getting the sign
It's
put
been
on it.
there. It's been there over a month, I think. The post has been there a while. I'm just wondering if it could still happen despite the study.
It has nothing to do with the study. Yeah,
Nothing.
it can go up anytime that staff has the ability. I think we own the signs already.
I think you
we
do.
have them in inventory as well, so.
I think it's a matter of putting them up.
Yeah, if you can follow up with Jason on that and see what the process is.
Yeah, I think.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I drive down there every now and then, just I expect to see it any day. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Any further questions or comments? Okay, thank you, Aaron. We appreciate your time on this. It's a difficult process, but hopefully we'll get it done soon.
Yeah, hopefully the answers will be more useful coming out of this study, regardless of what the math says. I think we need to understand the bigger picture and have a way to make this corridor work better for people, you know, until we can implement one of our bigger projects. So,
thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to sit here because I'm sort of observing the next one too.
Don't go away.
Eric, next item for Aaron, please.
Next item is report on feasibility for infilling sidewalk from Don and Ann Davis Park to Government Street along Elizabeth Street.
Yeah, one of the council goals is that a feasibility study be conducted to develop preliminary costs for infilling sidewalk from Don and Ann Davis Park. We've done an in-house study on that, and I'll turn it over to Aaron and Chris to discuss their findings and to get some further direction from council. So the big no, the stand. Switch.
Okay.
Now it's working. Yeah, we don't have to hold it. So anyway, Aaron, why don't you introduce the issue and turn it over to Chris for a description of what the findings were.
Yeah, so we've been tracking through, there's a couple of council goals that related to some future capital or design work. And so we've been kind of working through those. And this one in particular was to do a feasibility study and cost study for the infill of sidewalk. There wasn't a whole lot more that I could find about that goal, so Chris had to make some assumptions, and so he's just going to kind of hit the highlights real quick and then answer any questions. We'll try and keep it short and mostly focus on your questions. That's mine. That won't help you much.
Anyway, I forgot my paperwork, but we took a look at the infill goal, and first of all, we looked at the west side and of Elizabeth from Don and Davis State Park. I apologize for forgetting Ann in my description in the staff report. Primarily on the west side, there's quite a bit of existing sidewalk and driveways and ramps adjacent to hotels and some rentals, and pretty much extends from the park, Don and Davis State Park, to right about where Georgie's is at is where the sidewalk ends on that side. And along that existing pathway, there is quite a few driveways, approximately 25 driveways that are not ADA compliant fully. And so we didn't include those in this cost estimate because, the cost of it. So we looked at the cost from going from Park Street, or I can't remember if it's Mark or Park. Mark turns into Park and Mark, whatever. From Mark to the State Park on the west side. And that estimate that we presented herein is for that portion of work. We did look at, I did look at the cost for the east side, and it would roughly be about the same, maybe a little bit more, just in that section, not the whole length of the 4,000 plus or minus feet from park to park. So from Park Street to the park, or to the state park, they'd be about the same in quantity wise. The east side has a little more complications. You'd have to cross from the west side to the east side because there's not a continuing sidewalk on the east side. And the east side has some challenges to do that. Grade wise, require retaining walls, which would increase costs on that side. So that was our approach, is to look at this section of infill as it looks like it would be the most cost effective. It may not be the most cost effective, but we could do further investigation as there's $50,000, I believe, in the budget. And we didn't use any of that money since we did it in-house. So I'm open to any questions about that.
Yeah, Ryan, did you have a question?
Yeah, I did. I think the west side is probably the best use of the funds, and crossing on that wide part of Elizabeth Street there could be really problematic because it's not even. There's a bunch of blind spots, including all the connexes that are on Georgie's property. I think there's a lot of problems with crossing the street. I would prefer to stick to I'd like to see a proposal for the final cost estimates and all the curb work. And then the other issue is a right-of-way issue at the southern end of Elizabeth Street at Government Street Junction. there's a telephone pole right in the way to make that more of a gentle curve. And I don't know if you guys looked at that or looked at ways to make that T intersection a little safer or smoother, because where the telephone pole is in front of that rental property, there's really no place to put a sidewalk that wouldn't narrow that even further and make that a harder right turn into Yaquina Bay. Just my observations, but I would like to see an actual bid to see if we can make this project happen.
Right.
Yeah, I had a couple comments and questions. Have you, or are you planning to ask for input from the Bike Ped Committee?
Absolutely.
They're
Yeah.
pretty concerned about that. I think I've had a couple of people ask me about including crosswalks.
Mhm. Those were included in the estimate, striping and
Okay, yeah.
safety
And there'll be
crosswalks.
some transit stops too, I assume, for the bus along there?
We could look into that. It might be, I don't know where they would go or what the preference would be, but we could always put one in. There's room.
Yeah.
We're trying to, what we did is we anticipated a setback sidewalk because of where the utility poles is, as he mentioned, the Councilor Parker. So there are utility poles, and then we figured that instead of moving the utility poles back towards the houses, we would have the sidewalk closer to the houses. There may be some need for, in tight spots. I think the right-of-way is about 9 feet from the back of the curb. So we could have a 4-foot planter strip with a 5-foot sidewalk that would take you right to the right-of-way. In cases where that wouldn't work, we may need to obtain a sidewalk easement in just a couple isolated places.
On the wider part of Elizabeth, close to the park, is the street wide enough to put in any kind of planting strip in the middle, with some trees?
Oh, in the middle, in the center median? There could be the opportunity for that towards
Seemed
the
like
intersection.
That would be some good landscaping.
Yeah, and we
Change there.
anticipated a crossing from the end of Elizabeth on the south side to the state park kind of sidewalk over there.
I think one thing, though, I want to make sure people understand is we don't have this money available. At this point, we're going to have to find it. And if we're doing boulevard work, there's no way we could afford to do that project with everything. So I think the key is getting the sidewalk across is really a focus, because it's not in an urban renewal district. We're going to have to come up with this money from somewhere, and Golf Course Drive doesn't have that much more to give.
Golf Course Drive.
Yeah, I checked earlier, there's just enough in there to do the sidewalk.
So again, I think, I just want to make sure expectations are somewhat managed here as far as what we can afford to do as part of this project at this time. If we're talking about a major project, that's going to be something, we're going to have to figure a way to pay for that, that goes beyond this.
So sidewalk first.
I think if we're going to do that in the budget process, we're going to see where we can identify that funding to try to get that much work done, so.
What I would say to this point, and full disclosure, this is a street I see every day, but I do see the challenges of that not being paved there. And this is Hotel Row. So while we are saying like there's not money here, it feels very tied to our tourism in that row.
No, I think there's, when we were adding boulevards and trees down the middle of the street and everything else, that was definitely, this is going to be a stretch to fund, and we will work to see how we can fund this. To go beyond that without having a mechanism to do that, like what's their project, LID's local improvement district, that we're taxing the property owners on both sides to do, when you're talking about a more major project, we're talking about a lot more financial participation from other parties. So that's the issue I was trying to address as the scope of the project was going beyond what we had taken a look at.
But I would say that the scope of the project is also beyond a local improvement district, in that I do think that this is tied to our tourism in a big way, being that Elizabeth Street is a part of that bicycle, like, help me with the language of this, it's a part of the coastal.
Lighthouse to lighthouse.
Thank you. Yes. And, and just the other piece, but I do have questions about particularities, and I'm not giving up on this only because I do think that it is a part of what we've been talking about sidewalks. And we are down funded positions, which would make you think we might have some funds that haven't been expended, that we could be looking at this in that respect. But I have some questions about logistics around this. So to put it, I think it also makes sense to just be continuous and put it on the west side. And so the west side, how would it work? Because I think we would end up losing parking on one side of the street if we were to make ADA compliant sidewalks. And then is there some way that we have to work with the homeowners around that, or are we bumping out the side? I guess I'm just not clear on that piece. Are we saying there's a right of way? Or I just don't know the language of it, so forgive me if I'm not speaking accurately. But to continue that sidewalk on the west side where it's right at people's property lines, how does that piece work? Do we bump it out and then we would maybe lose parking on one side of the street? Because I don't think you have enough for parking on both sides of the street and through traffic on both sides of the street.
Actually, we do.
And a sidewalk and an ADA sidewalk?
There's 9 feet of clear space, so
okay.
we would be pushing it right up to the right-of-way with a 5-foot sidewalk and a 4-foot planter. You could leave a little buffer between the right-of-way line and the back of the sidewalk and make that planter a little bit smaller for any utilities. Or that's the nice thing about the west side. The utilities, the poles are on that side, but the fire hydrants and other obstacles are on the other side. So, and there are some poles over there for those services as well. But we just felt that this was the best choice on the west side. And that sounds like what I'm kind of hearing from you guys. So we won't lose parking. We shouldn't lose any parking unless we did something like at the corner, like Councilor Parker was suggesting around that pole. There could be a bump out. It would make that turn maybe a little worse. But if there's not cars parked there, then it'd be protected. The cars would be protected for that turn movement, and it would allow the ramps to go on a lot easier without poles having to be relocated.
And I just have one more piece, and that is the part in front of the most north building of the Shiloh Inn. If you've surveyed that piece, you can see that the way that the sidewalk actually curves in.
It goes by their doors.
Say again?
It goes by the doors.
It goes by the doors.
Yeah.
And it seems like more of an accessibility issue if you weren't sighted and you didn't know, because there is a curb cut right there where you could conceivably cross. But there's a car parked right there, you would hit that car. So I guess I just think about that piece to me, if there's some way to revisit that or just not have parking that's parallel right there, or not parallel, angled,
yeah.
Because it just seems like it's an accessibility issue. And so you have people bumping out into the street, walking behind cars that might be backing out. It just doesn't seem like it's very safe right there.
You're correct. And we were just looking at that right before we stepped in here. And that could be an isolated, one of those isolated areas of the existing sidewalk that we could perhaps add into the project. That's what we're looking for from council is what your expectations are and how we can meet your goal.
Yeah, that's a good reminder that, the scope of what we were looking at was pretty much strictly sidewalk infill and a lot of simplifying assumptions. There's a lot of nuance to that at this next level that I think we could clean up. So.
Yeah, and the hotels do have a wide driveways, and reconstructing those would present a construction issue depending on when you're constructing those. Ideally, you'd want to do it in nice weather, but then you get more foot traffic with tourists, excuse me. So it makes construction a little more difficult.
I mean, there's foot traffic on Elizabeth Street all the time. Yeah.
But again, because Chris was able to do this feasibility level study in-house, we didn't spend the little bit of money we do have. So even though we don't have a big budget right now, we could potentially repurpose the remaining funds towards some early steps, maybe some survey and/or preliminary design by a engineering firm or something. And a lot of that would maybe flesh this out a little bit so we could identify a lot of the wants and start looking at what we
So I
can do.
think the primary question and the thing we wanted to make sure we're on the same page is putting sidewalk on the west side of the street to Government Street. And if that's the case, we do have some money that we can spend to take a closer look at that particular issue and to make sure that that concept was consistent with what the council's expectations were. I didn't know if there was expectations that sidewalk would be on the east side or the west side. And I think once we work that through, we would hopefully have some numbers that could help inform the budget process. Maybe if we can speed things up here a bit.
Yeah, we could, I mean, if we could get a preliminary design done with a little more detail, we could get an updated cost that's a lot more accurate.
Well, and also with the new Hallmark Whaler build out that they're going to do in that, premium location, I feel like there's just going to be work in this area for a while. So this feels like it's well timed and that we're going to see a lot more, even more foot traffic up and down Elizabeth Street.
And with any projects that take place, we do typically require certain improvements to be made to sidewalks and other things. So where there are improvements being made, that's always a consideration depending on where the location is and what we can, what there's room to deal with and what's appropriate from a equity standpoint with the developer. So,
hey Spencer, when speaking of sidewalks, just a reminder that I'm still looking for that IPM plan to be implemented with the streets crew, and if we put in new sidewalks at great expense, I would hope that since that's such a major thoroughfare in town, that maintenance of that sidewalk portion would be a higher priority than maybe some of the less busy parts of town, just because of its visibility. Because we have new city sidewalks over by the bridge, and they kind of go to nowhere and just kind of go into the gravel. And so a new sidewalk segment implies maintenance, and that's also something to consider.
No, and I think that is an important issue, and that's an issue that we've had some preliminary internal discussions on, because our code is not really as clear as I think it should be as far as the responsibility of providing normal maintenance, sweeping, and those sorts of things of the sidewalk. And that's an issue I want to bring back to the council at some point, probably after the first of the year, to talk a little bit about that, because again, we could either clarify the code, or we're going to need to look at additional resources to really properly maintain some of these sidewalks that we have in the community if the property owners aren't responsible for that maintenance activity. So that is a consideration, but it sounds like there's a consensus for the west side, and perhaps some spot cleanup on a couple of the spots that you talked about where the bump in occurs, I guess.
Speaking about Ryan and the sidewalk maintenance, when we were in DC, there was that one street that we walked on where the tree was. The sidewalk was like that. It was pretty interesting. Beatrice, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just have a question. How long it takes for the neighbors, to get a notice? What is the time? Because I noticed some of them, they're going to be very close to the street. So they might have to do some things in their property to...
Yeah, that always is an issue, because everyone thinks they own the right-of-way.
Yes.
And they have fences and they have things and parking spots and stuff that may change after a sidewalk is put in. So I think one of the things that we would want to do as part of this preliminary process is make contact with all those property owners to tell them what we're proposing to do, to get some feedback early on in that process. Because as we know, anytime we do things where we haven't done something before that's encroaching in someone's yard, that's not really their yard, but part of the right-of-way, it can cause, some neighborhood excitement, so. we'll try to.
That's a good point. We usually try to engage them about the 30% level concept, once we have a concept down, and have an open house or a minimum open house. And then also, if there's any questions about the east or west side, the west side has less cross streets than the east side too, which makes it a more of a thoroughfare, not having to cross streets and put in ramps. So it's another
It sounds like we're
benefit.
good with the west side, and we'll take it to the next step.
All right.
Question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so one of my first questions, is it a requirement to work in the engineering department, you have to wear your glasses on top of your head? Claire's back there.
It's quicker
They
than.
get that from engineering school.
I think it's worth spending the 50 grand to get the study shovel ready, to get it going. Is it going to be an in-house project, or are you going to?
I don't think, given the other 80-some odd projects we have, I think at this point, it'd be good to farm it out so we can maximize our staff time on keep other projects going.
RFP?
Yeah, I think so. But I think it'd be pretty short, straightforward RFP. We just, we can build on what Chris has already done.
Yeah, we have
So
the
that'll help.
capabilities of doing it in-house, but
And
it's
you
just a
think you can
matter
get
of
it done
prioritizing
for
projects.
50,000?
I think
No.
what we'd want to do, I don't think that'd cover the full design, but I think we would go as far as 50 will take us. And hopefully that'll be enough to have a better sense of
Because you have to
what's
do a
left.
survey too. I mean, you have to
Yeah,
do
I
a
was
survey out there
estimating
first thing.
80,000 for engineering and surveying
Yeah.
together.
But if we could get the survey and preliminary engineering, if ideally through 30%, that would also kind of be a perfect time to maybe have some outreach and all that if we have to wait for additional funds.
Okay, thanks.
Spencer, is there a way to tax the people on Golf Course Drive to pay for part of this project?
No, there is not, so.
I think another city councilor lives on this street.
Okay, thank you both, and we'll see you in a minute.
Me, yeah.
Eric, next
Right,
item,
thank you
please.
guys.
Next item is the Local Contract Review Board, a notice of an intent to award the design and construction engineering services contract for a water treatment plant excess recirculating system, XR, to Stantec Consulting Services, Inc., in the amount of $436,341.00.
I'd like to open the Contractor Review Board. Spencer?
The only item on the contract review board is regarding the right one, is regarding the XR system. That is a recommendation that was made after the investigation was completed on the water problems that we had in 2020. There were two major construction activities. The first one has been completed, and that was the addition of an additional filter, bank of filters at the water plant. That work, as I indicated, has been completed. The second recommendation is to put an XR system, which is a recirculating system, which allows for more effective cleaning of the filters in a quicker fashion. And I don't understand exactly all the processes that go on that XR system, but it would, in the case of the problem that we had, it would have provided an opportunity to expedite the cleaning of the filters so that we wouldn't have had a water production problem that we had in 2020. And RFPs were issued. I do want to note that the RFP that's recommended is significantly more expensive than the one not being recommended, but we'll have Aaron and Claire talk a little bit about that to the council. So if you could kind of give a synopsis of the process that was used and the reasons for the recommendation.
Right, so we did advertise the RFP on the state system, the Oregon BIS system, and we received 2 responses, and they were from Stantec and from HDR Engineering. And what we did was we evaluated them. We've evaluated the proposals separately from the cost proposal, and we ranked, gave them points for the different components of their the proposals, and I should have brought my paper with me to show you those. So that part of the ranking, Stantec scored slightly higher than HDR did, just on the basis of the proposal and the completeness of the proposal. Then secondarily, we opened the cost proposals as well, and did have to do some back and forth, particularly with HDR, asking some other questions about their cost proposal because it was just a very simplified, whereas Stantec did go into additional detail about the number of hours for each component of the process. And so based upon the scoring and the experience of Stantec, despite the additional cost, we recommended that they be the ones to receive the bid. And we do have the funds in this year's budget. Construction would be next fiscal year when additional funds would have to be appropriated.
So how, if we do this, what's the life of the system? How much does it extend the life of the system, or are we going to have to replace the whole system down the road? Or?
It should extend the life of the system because it will be doing more cleaning, but I could not give you a number of
Really
years.
good question, though. Because right now, I understand we're overloaded, right, at certain times?
We had been, yes, we had been. It was the organic loading that was too much for it.
The environmental conditions that happened when we had to curtail water use could happen and are likely to happen again. So what, hopefully, I suspect that by not overloading the system in such situations, we will extend our life as opposed to abusing the filters. And
this will make it more efficient to process the water quicker?
I believe so, yeah. I mean, the recommendation to do it was, I think, pretty universally supported by the engineering firms. I believe, didn't HDR originate the concept to us?
Yes, and the last
and Paul.
unit that was put in already has that sort of, the capabilities are a little bit more built in, so on that last unit.
Well, I'm hoping this would solve our problem for a few years and not have to rebuild the whole system. I mean, that's going to be a big bullet.
And I would think that a lot of the parts that need to be swapped out, the filters, I mean, I think that'll just be its normal life cycle. Maybe they're slightly enhanced by this not overloading them. But I think the infrastructure around the removable throwaway parts is pretty robust. I would think we have quite a long life cycle on those. The pipes and parts are pretty straightforward. Yeah, I think that the recommendation to do XR is pretty strong. We really should strongly consider it.
Okay. Ryan, did you have a question?
I do indeed, Mr. Mayor. So is this a replacement schedule included in the water treatment plant master plan? That's one question. The second question is, this new expense, won't be affected by any piping issues or rerouting of things within the plant itself when we get the new dam?
I'm speculating a bit, Counselor, but I don't.
Speculation welcome.
I don't believe that the XR would have been part of the master plan because the environmental conditions that triggered the problem had not been experienced yet in the city. I think it's a logical solution that came up when we ran into that problem. And then I suspect it shouldn't have a real major change once we have a new dam. And I would think any piping tweaks we'd have to do would probably have to happen whether we do XR or not.
Yeah, because I believe the entire project's within the footprint of the filtration plant.
Yes.
So
Right,
I don't
right.
think the dam project would have any impact on that.
Right,
And
there's a new raw water pipeline that's part of the dam design.
The other thing too is there's some recollection and I may be mistaken on this, but when Tim Gross was Public Works Director, and when the plant was built, they had to go through a number of cost-cutting steps with the plant. And I think there was originally plans to do something that would have probably helped facilitate the problem that we had that wasn't able to get done. I do know that they wanted to put that original bank of, or that last bank of filters in the original project, but they cut that out because of the cost overruns on the project, and that didn't get done at that time. But I can confirm this later on, but I do think that there was some suggestion of some sort of additional recirculating system that didn't get built as part of the original dam because of our original plant because of costs.
Yeah.
But that's just a recollection of a conversation with Tim Gross when we were doing the presentations to the council on the outcomes of the work in 2020. Of the
Sounds
review.
exactly like the kind of thing that would get quote-unquote value engineered out.
Right.
Yeah.
Dietmar?
I ask one more question.
Oh, go ahead.
So what's
Oh, no.
Froze.
what's the result of that decision?
Yeah, you froze up, Ryan, so could you say the question one more time?
What's the alternative or the economic status quo of not doing this purchase?
It's a risk of.
Risk of
Accepting
plant
the
not being
risk.
able to produce sufficient water.
I think, as Spencer got to state several times in Washington, D.C., the cost to our water customers was significant for just a week of curtailment.
Right.
So
Okay.
it's the risk of that. We can't predict it. I think we generally know why it happened, but I don't think to the point where we could say this is exactly how you stop it. So I think this is the insurance.
This is a pre-filter system, right? Yeah.
It's a recirculating system. I'm not overly familiar with the nuance of it.
Anyway, I'll move to get it done. Are you done, Ryan, with your question?
Yeah, I just wanted to note that the cost of this is about the same that we're spending for the treatment side, wastewater treatment side for their master plan was around $430,000 as well. But obviously this is necessary, so I'll go ahead and support it.
Well, if we don't fund this, maybe we can build a sidewalk, huh?
I just tax people on the golf course.
Boulevard.
I move to issue a notice of intent to award the water treatment plant XR system design and construction management project to Stantec Consulting Services, Inc. in the amount of $436,341, and contingent upon no protest within 7 days, authorize the award for the design and construction management project to install and direct the city manager to execute a contract on behalf of the city of Newport. How come David isn't in this motion?
They left me out of the motion, I guess. They no longer require my services.
Is that right?
No, we require a signature, though, before I sign it, so.
Well, there you go.
Do we have a second?
Ryan.
Ryan? Okay, thank you, Ryan. Motion made by Councilor Goebel, second by Councilor Parker. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. The next item is report from the mayor and the council. Oh, close the contractor review board. Thank you both. I just want to
Claire's got her
say,
glasses on her head as well.
Yeah, I know, I saw that, all three of you
And
guys.
I did earlier, but I changed it, so I didn't want to be part of the engineering thing.
Thought that was a prerequisite. You had to.
I just want to say, I think last week was wonderful. I think we all had a great time in Bend. We had, what?
Start again. It sounded like there was
Oh.
side conversation.
I think that we had a great time last week in Bend at the League of Oregon Cities Conference. I think everybody enjoyed it. I think we all learned a lot. And it was interesting. There were over 400 people there at the conference from 200 cities across the state. Pretty amazing to me. And then there was another 200 in staff and vendors, so there's about 600 people there. So that's pretty significant in my view. And the best part was we got to meet your sister. She's a wonderful person.
Oh, well, thank you. She had a nice time.
Yeah, well, I think she increased the enjoyment of the week.
Oh, that's very nice of you to say.
The next thing, the executive director from the League of Oregon Cities, we're getting real close to finishing that. We hired a consulting company. They had 15 people apply, and including the interim director, and Jake Boone, if you know Jake from Cottage Grove, he's also applied. The company we hired is going to pare it down to 6 people. They're having the final conversations now. The applicants have to submit this week a list of questions or a list of answers to certain questions. And then when that is finished, the 5 or 6 will go to the board, and the board meeting is on October 26th. And we want to get this done before the end of the year, and hopefully get somebody on board January 1. That's the goal, and I think we're gonna be there. And it's an interesting process, just like any hiring. You know, when we hired Spencer, we had to go through that, and you know, it's a similar process, and it takes time, unfortunately, but I think we're getting down to the end here. And with that, anyone else have a comment?
I would like to add to a future work session topic some DEI conversations among the council. It was wonderful to get to go to the all-day session that was covering diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I was there with Councilor Boteo and Peggy Hawker and Cynthia. Were you there all day?
That one.
Not that one, but it was just, it felt like this is something we all should be really staying up on, and very likely we all will be working together for the next 2 years, you know, for sure. So I think maybe making sure we really are all kind of understanding our community a little better and supporting that aim. So I'd like to just kind of put that, and I'm happy to talk with you offline about how we could put that on an agenda, what we could do. But there is, the League of Oregon Cities has now a DEI library, and that's online and stuff like that. But I just think that's something that there's more emphasis on it. So what are we doing internally to really mirror that work and put the time in collectively? The other thing I wanted to ask is, like what workshops people went to, you know, like because we weren't all at the same ones, and I would love to hear that, but I would like that, like for a future work session. I don't know that I think it needs to be now, because I'd actually like to hear more than what the title of it was, but like, what did you get? What were your takeaways? And lastly, while we were all at the League of Oregon Cities conference, Derek was acting city manager one day, and Chief Malloy was one day. And were there any major emergencies, or is this just a Peggy acting city manager thing? She's out of the country, so we can say whatever we want.
We did have a little excitement at City Hall yes, during that time period. So I was communicating regularly with folks that were left here. So, but not to the extent of a Peggy emergency. The other thing that was really exciting is Peggy won the Herman Carilli Award, and that's the league. This year they actually awarded 2, because I think of the gap of time that they had, you know, with COVID, where we didn't have the awards the previous year. But the interesting fact about that is that I think Peggy and David Hawker are probably the only husband and wife winners of the League of Oregon Cities Carilli Award.
Something.
Question. But I noticed when I came in this evening that, is that because of the eviction notice, or is it voluntary?
We provided them with a 72-hour notice, and we had the police officers, Jason and others, go out and talk with them and kind of just, I wasn't there, but talk through some of the issues, and apparently it got resolved.
No, you're talking about what's out there now, or?
I'm talking about on the front lawn here.
Right now, or what was there last week?
Oh, right now.
So what's on front lawn right now?
Nothing out there right now.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
They moved them on.
That's what I'm saying, it got dealt with.
Because of the 72 hours.
I just said, we issued the 72-hour notice with language in it. The police officers and Jason went out and conferred with them, Jovita, and they worked through the issues and it got resolved, at least at this point. Yeah, can't predict the future, but at least at this point it's gotten resolved.
They can't hear you. Are you done?
I'm done.
Okay. Any other comments or questions, Cynthia?
Well,
Yeah, Dean, I have something to say.
sure, go ahead.
Sorry, I can't see everybody. I can only see Spencer in the view here, and half of Aaron. There we go. So the most interesting and possibly most frustrating session I went to was the one where they were handing out cases of COVID. So I'm glad you guys didn't go to that one. But the housing tour was great. But Bend is a well-funded, large, sick tax roll city, and almost every scenario they showed us aren't currently applicable because of the scale and the economics. But what I would like to do as part of the next time we discuss housing in a work session is figure out what model can we do here. How can we get a tiny home or a pallet house temporary thing going? Because we saw all different kinds of. I think we went to 5 or 6 different places, and some of them were owner-occupied, some of them were rentals, and some of them were senior care with on-site, federally recognized health clinic in the first floor. And we have a federally recognized health clinic in this county, but it's out in Siletz, and so we're going to really need to chew on every possible partnership and turn over all the stones to get the money, but Bend can do it, so that means there's a precedent for the paper agreements that some of these housing developments have gone under. And I got the city of Bend's housing director lady that's greenlighted all these projects. I got her card, and I would maybe almost like to invite her to a work session so she can help Newport figure out some small version of success that Bend has done, if possible, because I don't want to just go on the tour and see that Bend's being successful. I want Newport to be able to create more units through some of these models. And I know there are starts to some of those models, like the Habitat Village that we saw. I know they have 5 units they want to build in Waldport. They just need money. And so I guess for small cities, which is most of the Oregon cities that are LOC members, are small towns, and we got to figure out a way to somehow scale up what places like Bend have done to get actual builds going. So I would like to get some sort of a work session together about that with some pre-planning.
Yeah, I think that's something we certainly can do. And I think I think Cynthia, you're on the housing
Needs analysis.
analysis, which that process is going on. But I think this would kind of fit in nicely with that whole process, potentially, if she'd be available to either participate in person or virtually in a meeting with council.
Yeah. Well, it's all starting to tie in together, especially the House Bill 4123 that we're working on along with the county. I went on 2 tours of housing the day before Ryan went on his housing tour, so I saw some different ones. These were, the first one I went to was a small group of clustered homes, which were for, I believe, about 12 residents, for single adults, and they were low barrier. They were for housing felons and for sex offenders who really cannot find hardly anyone to rent to them. It's really difficult, but they were very nice little homes, and there was a supervisor there, of course. But it took them a long time to get those built. And then the second group of homes I went to was for veterans, and it was a little village of about 18 tiny homes with a big community room in the center with washers and dryers and a larger kitchen and a place to gather. And they had an outdoor barbecue pit, and it was all very nice and tidy, But, you know, it took them a long time to get that built, and it costs a lot of money too. In the housing needs analysis study, which is ongoing, they have a list of various actions which can be implemented, and they are rated with an impact statement, like the low impact, low to moderate impact, moderate to high impact. And I was kind of surprised to read in that tiny homes have a fairly low impact upon the homeless because you can't build very many of them. Like, here's Bend, and they had 18, you know, it's just such a small amount, so we really have our work cut out for us. So it was just very interesting.
Beatrice?
Yes, I agree. The mini houses, you know, I think it will be nice to talk more about that. Yeah. I just want to comment, you know, the conference that we were all, I think from PSU, you know, the information, the feedback about how the communities, you know, they had feeling about, you know, reach and engagement, being in the community, into meetings, you know. They are doing a great job in other communities assessing what the community would like to see, how they would like to be approached or how they like to be engaged. Like, I just thinking, you know, it will be nice in the future, you know, to have more information from the community, what ways to reach out, you know, using maybe different kind of media and, you know, look at tonight, we don't have anybody here, but, you know, I think there are very important issues that I think, you know, how we can reach out more the community to be, I mean, I'm not asking to be present, but maybe, you know, giving feedback on the items that we are talking about.
Okay, anyone else? Just before I forget, the Long Road veterans that are walking here entered Wyoming yesterday. So they're making some darn good progress. Nebraska's a long state to walk across.
I think, and I also heard that there's, the time they'll get to Newport will be quite a bit later than what we were originally looking at. So was there an estimate of the date?
The last I heard is the end of November.
Okay.
So, but that's fluid, and we won't know until they get here. The other good thing is they opened all the roads in Yellowstone Park because of the flooding. So hopefully that'll help them get across Yellowstone as well.
Get across the Rockies this time of year.
Well, that's going to be the hard part. That's going to be a long walk, you know, and of course it's going to be, the weather's changing. Next week, I don't know if you all know, but we're going to get about 4 inches of rain next week. So. Okay, yeah. Okay, with that, we have one more item that Eric forgot to put on the agenda. Public comment. Is there anyone in the public that wishes to make a final comment before we leave? Seeing none, we are adjourned.
It is on the agenda.
I thought it was on there too.
Not on mine.
Turn the page.
Oh, there it is. I was looking at the work section. Sorry, Eric. We'll see you on Tuesday at Lee's Walk.
Once said, it can't be taken.